This is Beth Silvers. You're listening to Pantsuit Politics. Sarah is out today, and I am delighted to be joined by our dear friend, Vanessa Zoltan. Vanessa is one of my favorite people and thinkers, and she joined me today for a very broad discussion of higher education. The Trump administration has taken fast and furious executive action concerning higher ed. Impacts all of us, even those of us who have no connection to any college or university, in a huge variety of ways. And Vanessa and I are going to dig into that. She is such a wealth of insight and perspective, and I hope that you enjoy hearing from her as much as I enjoyed talking with her. And then she sticks around for Outside of Politics to tell us about What Matters, a program that she's created to help find meaning in life through literature. We have a very fun discussion about characters as avatars for us, as kind of our personal guides and coaches and patron saints. So I can't wait for you to hear it. Before we do that, I just want to say congratulations to everyone. We have powered through May-cember, and we are rounding the corner into summer. We have lots planned for you. For our subscribers, we have our 30 days of meditation starting next Thursday. Reimagining Citizenship is the name of that series. We'll count down to the 4th of July. We have the Pantsuit Politics Film Club launching with Women Talking and 12 Angry Men. Our very own Norma is leading that. It's going to be so much fun. We have the Good News Brief. We have more to say. We have Sarah and I sharing our spicy takes on bonus episodes. So if you have not joined us in the Pantsuit Politics Premium community over on Substack, we hope that you'll do that today. And then here, next Tuesday, we will have our 1000th episode with the one and only Jen Hatmaker. There would not be a Pantsuit Politics without Jen Hatmaker's generous invitation to host Sarah and me on her podcast many years ago. We still hear people saying that's where I found you. So we wanted to bring Jen over to celebrate this milestone. And we are so happy that she said yes and can't wait to share that conversation with you. And then next Friday, we're beginning our flashback series. We're going to be talking about the year 2015. 2015, so long ago. So many seeds of where we are today. It felt like a different universe listening back to our episodes that year, and it was really helpful to put today's events in some sort of timeline. So we hope you'll join us for that trip back in time. We're going to have a lot of fun this summer together. Slather on the sunscreen, charge up your AirPods, and join us for lots of deep thinking, but laughter and fun too. Next up, Vanessa Zoltan of Common Ground, Not Sorry, many wonderful podcasts, including Harry Potter and the Sacred Text, Hot and Bothered, so many things that Vanessa does, will be here to discuss higher education with me. I am so thrilled to be here with Vanessa Zoltan. Vanessa, you do so many things in the world that I'm just going to invite you to tell people what you want them to know about those many things.
I really think it's so important that people understand that at least 2 or 3 days a week I get a good nap in.
That's good to hear.
Thank you. That is the thing that I'm most passionate about that I participate in. So relevantly to today is actually a caveat that I sound more affiliated with Harvard University than I am. So I graduated from Harvard Divinity School 10 years ago. I'm a non-denominational chaplain as sort of my career, my vocation. And as I was getting my Master's of Divinity from Harvard, I was living on campus as a freshman advisor in Proctor. I actually stayed on for 7 years in that role, and I was the assistant humanist chaplain at Harvard for 4 years. And then I took a big old break. I had no affiliation with the university for 5 years, and as of last year, I am back adjuncting one class at Harvard Divinity School. And so my affiliation is teeny, teeny, tiny. And I have like great affection for, just like a lot of people at Harvard. And it's been strange to watch it. It was a strange place to live because it is like living in a tourist location. You know, I lived in the middle of Harvard Yard. And it has just gotten stranger and stranger as a place to be affiliated with, as the federal government is sort of obsessed with this place that really does end up feeling just like where you have a bad apartment.
Well, I want to talk about that. I really want to know why you think there is an obsession with Harvard specifically. There is a higher ed obsession in
Yeah.
general. There is a DEI obsession. There is an anti-Semitism. There's a lot of obsessing happening
Yeah.
right now in the administration. And I think that that's an objectively fair thing to say, even if you agree with some of what they're doing. The speed and velocity and intensity of action, all concentrated in the executive branch, not partnered with Congress, is obsessive.
Yes.
Why do you think Harvard specifically?
I do think some of it was just like too good to be true for Republicans in Congress, in terms of a flashpoint of October 7th happening as a Black progressive woman was made president of Harvard, right? Like all of the, the University of Pennsylvania's president was called before Congress, Harvard's president was called before Congress, and there Harvard was the one that was able to stick out like a sore thumb, politically. And I think that so some of it really is just circumstance. I think that there are billionaires affiliated with Harvard who have taken advantage of the Trump administration to
Mm-hmm.
sort of get back because of personal vendettas. Bill Ackman, in an interview that he did with New York Magazine last year, essentially said that his vendetta started with Claudine Gay because she didn't call him back fast enough.
Mm.
And so I really do think some of this is like teeny tiny petty stuff. And then Harvard does have this princely, outsized, overfunded, overprivileged, and like deeply complex reputation. And I think we should be skeptical of anything that has that much power and prestige and that many billions. Um, and then, Trump likes to take anything down that he sees as potentially shinier than he is.
Yeah.
And I think that people's distrust of places like Harvard is fair. So I think he's playing on that.
Can you say more about why you think that distrust is fair?
Yeah, I personally think we should be skeptical of anything that has so many billions of dollars that are so protected and that has so much secrecy around it. I think it's very telling that the board of Harvard is called the corporation.
Yeah.
And I don't think that any single place should amass as much power as a place like Harvard has. I think that all of the billions of dollars of research that Harvard does probably should be spread out more amongst more public universities. And I think that now I immediately want to start contradicting myself and saying all the good things about Harvard. But no, I think we absolutely should be skeptical of any single entity that has the amount of power and prestige that Harvard has.
Well, I want you to do that too, though, because there's a part of me that has struggled with how to talk about all of the administration's very pointed attacks, specifically at Harvard, but on higher ed in general,
Right.
because I am aware that the Ivy Leagues are a tiny, tiny percentage of the population
Yes.
in terms of who gets to go. College in general is a small percentage of the population.
Yeah.
When we're thinking about like ranking the order of problems in society, where does this go? It's really tough.
Right.
But I think you have a great perspective on how this does actually ultimately get to everyone. It's not as much about the student experience as about the learning that takes place.
Yeah. So there are a couple of different ways to think about a place like Harvard. And one of them is by looking at the financial statements, right? And if you just look at it as a business, the fact that Harvard happens to teach is so low on the financial statements, right? It is mostly a hospital and research institute. And by a hospital, I mean many hospitals, right? And the federal funding that goes to Harvard is actually federal contracts where the federal government has been paying research hospitals to do biomedical research that the government isn't otherwise set up to do. And so, a good friend of mine for 5 years was doing research. Technically, she was an employee of Harvard University, but she was doing research on early intervention on psychosis in children across the United States. So, children who were showing signs of potentially having psychotic episodes later in life, on how to intervene to potentially, we know that the more delayed early symptoms start, the better chance that people have for fully integrated lives as far as mental health. And so she's meeting with people all over the country in doing this research. And like, this is cutting edge behavioral health research. And it looks like she's employed by Harvard, but she's funded by the federal government. And this is absolutely research that is like pivotal for all of our lives, right? As we know that the mental health crisis for young people is scarier and scarier every month. um, and then what's really frightening about stopping funding right now is the amount of biomedical research that is funded through Harvard and Columbia and other places where the Trump administration is trying to stop funding. Biomedical research, if you pause it, like cells are growing for them to do research on tuberculosis, on staph infections, on like real things that like we could know someone. Truly, this is life or death. Like, we could know someone who will die in 10 years because funding has been halted on these experiments. These cells, it's not a light switch that you turn off and turn back on. These cells are not growing. And so everything is going to have to start over. And then we can talk about, I mean, what this does, not just biomedically, but like brain drain stuff. But this really is life or death research that it is beneficial when certain places have a lot of money so that they can build the right facilities to do this cutting edge work. And then you attract the best people. And this takes decades and decades to build these teams with these systems in place. And it's just frightening how quick it is to destroy it and how long it's going to take to rebuild it.
Spent this week reading the Make America Healthy Again Commission report.
Thank you for your work.
Well, thank you for saying that. And it was interesting because so many of the priorities in that document are really at odds with these research cuts.
Yeah.
That document expresses a need for so much more research on environmental determinants of health, environmental factors, PFAS, chemicals that we're exposed to. It makes, I think, a pretty compelling case that we don't know enough about how the chemicals that we interact with every day interact with each other and our long-term exposure. Like we do a pretty good job making sure things are safe in isolation.
Yep.
But not in combination.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
And I thought it was
like
a
your
good
pharmacist
point. Right.
Being like, don't take these drugs together.
I didn't go into this report expecting to find a lot of things that I thought, yeah, I agree with that. But I did find some of them.
Yeah.
And all of those things that I found myself agreeing with stand at complete odds with these funding decisions as to universities.
Yeah.
Because we really do have to outsource this research somewhere. I don't know where people think it's going to go if it's not being conducted at the university level. I also wanted to mention, I love your look at the financial statements to think about how many schools are first and foremost hospitals.
Yeah.
I read this great piece this morning from the Kentucky Lantern, which is a wonderful state news media outlet. We're so lucky to have it here. And it was about a program in Louisville that is focused on treating and preventing child abuse. And it is funded through Medicaid and its partnership with the University of Kentucky. And it talked about how they keep trying to get upstream. How do we eventually not just treat children well who've been abused, but also work with these families to stop the abuse, and especially working with single parents where child abuse happens not because the parent is abusive, but because they don't have childcare options and they end up leaving the kid with someone they think is safe who turns out not to be safe. And then here we are.
Yeah.
they talked about how the University of Kentucky has a camp for new dads
Oh
to
my
just
God.
learn parenting skills,
Yeah.
and how those kinds of programs are how we really make an
Yes.
impact, and it's incredible.
Yeah.
And so it's easy to kind of sneer at funding for higher ed until you get into that specific work that's rolling out in communities for people who will never go to college or an Ivy League institution, maybe. But it's still really, really impactful in their lives.
I mean, here's another way that we need funding for universities. The nursing shortage in this country is in large part because you get paid more to be a nurse than to teach at nursing school. And so
Mm.
they can't hire nursing teachers. You've been a nurse for 20 years. You're not in a financial position to take a cut of your salary to go teach, even if you're like, I have 20 years of learning behind me. I want to. And so we subsidize universities to pay nursing staff so that they can make the same amount of money or hopefully even a little bit more to be teachers of nurses so that they want to teach future nurses, right? Like this is just so important. We like there are long waits at ERs because we are not funding nursing schools. So it's like I mean like I really understand why this feels so abstract and like Harvard has $1 billion. What does it matter? And we can also talk about like ties around endowments for a long time. Um, but also, right, like, yeah, it impacts you the next time you go to the emergency room, whether or not we are federally and state funding universities.
It's this tight dance as you talk about the endowments and some of
Yeah.
the less socially useful aspects of these universities,
Yes.
because I think sometimes if you are critical of the Trump administration's actions in a whole variety of areas, it's like you're saying, don't change anything.
Right.
Everything's perfect the way it is. And
Right.
that's not where we are.
No, I have feedback for Harvard on and I have always been happy to give it and I will continue to give it. No, I I don't know. I'm skeptical of power probably in like an obnoxious way. So I am highly skeptical of places like Harvard. I just don't think that the Trump administration is attacking Harvard based on the reasons that Harvard actually should be critiqued and held to account.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the broader attacks on higher ed from the Trump
Yeah.
administration. They came out of the gate, if you think late January through maybe end of February, with all of these anti-DEI orders,
Yeah.
fully connected to the sentiment that he campaigned on,
Yep.
that woke ideology has gone too far, that all of our institutions are spending more time on diversity initiatives than actually doing what they're there to do. I think that there's maybe some fairness in that argument. Certainly a lot of people bought it.
Yep.
Um, what that translated to in terms of policy are a bunch of orders that as a person with legal training, I can't make heads or tails of what the obligations actually become
Mm-hmm.
for universities, because we just over and over see these orders saying you will lose your funding if you unlawfully discriminate.
Mm-hmm.
And almost any effort to make your facility one, where your institution one, where all people are recruited, retained, and welcomed, seem to fall in that umbrella of unlawful discrimination.
Right.
So I'm curious what, if any, experiences you've had in the wake of these orders.
So in the wake of these orders, I have yet to see the fallout. What I will say is that what I saw in my 7 years as a freshman advisor at one of the most diverse universities in the world at Harvard was how bad Harvard was at taking care of its diverse student body.
Mm.
These brilliant students right? 1,600 on the SATs, 4.4 GPAs would come from first generation college students and a poorer school district. So I'll give an example of one student who she arrived at Harvard wanting to be a computer science major. They did not have AP computer science at her high school. She was an African American student of mine. And Introduction to Computer Science at Harvard is funded in large part by Facebook and Zuckerberg. And they don't want they want kids to graduate after 8 semesters of CS at a certain level. And that means that intro to CS has to start at a certain level. So intro to CS at Harvard is not an intro class. You cannot come in without any computer science background. And it's designed that way. So that means that only kids who went to rich high schools that had AP computer science can actually be computer science majors at Harvard because of funding. And like that is disgusting that an 18-year-old who has just gotten into Harvard because she is the best and the brightest in her school is set up to fail. One of the majors just isn't available to her. And that is why initiatives like DEI are created, are to say, like, we really want the best and the brightest kids, and it shouldn't matter where they come from, and 18 shouldn't be too late. And so we have to understand how to take care of our entire student body, and that means kids that didn't go to prep school. And so I just really I just saw this girl's heart get broken as she realized at 18 at Harvard, it was too late for her to become a programmer.
Wow.
And like this was like 8 years ago, right? Like this is not a long time ago. And so these programs are necessary in order to figure out how to make the country more equitable, right? Because if we want kids from poorer school districts to have the same access as kids who can afford private school, then like it has to happen on that level. And so I'm not involved enough at the university now to have seen what it looks like post cuts, but I will say like these kinds of measures are necessary if we want these schools to be equitable spaces.
And I would think that most Republicans would agree with this critique of Harvard and this program and specifically.
I would hope so.
I mean, this seems like a race neutral
Yes.
DEI initiative,
Yes.
right? And because it is still under that DEI umbrella, it's unclear to me whether it would be offensive to this sort of new way or not. And I think it's unclear because the people writing these orders are not in the details enough to understand kind of what they would really disagree with substantively and what they wouldn't.
Right.
And that's why we can't have this policy made at this level.
Exactly.
In my opinion. You know, I think we as a society were arriving at the conclusion that some of our DEI efforts were well intended but not working.
Oh, for sure.
I think we were getting there. I think that's why in some ways this resonated from his campaign.
Right.
I just feel like we needed more time to work out in our context what that meant, instead of having it come from the president of the United States down into these programs where there are pockets of money doing things he would agree with if we just sat down and had a conversation, but that people are now scared to spend because they don't want to have billions of dollars in research funding yanked from them.
And I don't think that I would not know if I had not sat with a brilliant girl as she realized that the moment that she thought doors were opening up to her, they weren't.
Yeah.
Right? And not because of the color of her skin, but because of the school she went to, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so like guess what? We actually have to like talk to teachers and talk to frontline workers in order to understand where these inequities are coming from and how they are harming all of us, right? Like, the world is worse because we don't have this young woman in her chosen profession. Like, we would all be better off with this brilliant girl who can do anything. If she was able to learn all the skills that she wanted to learn, we would all be better off.
Well, and if this is a student who made it to Harvard
Right.
and the doors are still slamming for her, think about what that indicates downstream.
Yeah. Oh. And so, and of course, DEI initiatives weren't well done. They were done they've been done too late and from the wrong place of motivation, right? A lot of these DEI initiatives were done in the wake of George Floyd's murder, and people did them because they were scared, not because they actually saw inequality. And like we all know, emergency mode doesn't get us to long-term solutions. It's better than not doing it at all. And you have a heart attack, and that's when you realize that you have to, stop
Change
smoking
diet or whatever.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And, those drastic first moves aren't necessarily the most sustainable moves. Eventually you're going to be like, no, I am going to eat cake every once in a while, whatever it is. But we're not grateful for the emergency, and we don't want to hold on to our big emergency responses. But God, like, shame on us if we don't learn from the heart attack at all. And if we
Right.
are like, well, my diet hasn't made me 100% healthier immediately, so I guess I'll just go back to smoking.
Yeah. I mean, I hope that we can get to a place. I think that's such a great metaphor where we're in like maintenance mode, where it's
Yes.
more rather than needing specific offices for this, it's just part of our continuous improvement. It's just part of how we try to do better all the time. We're not there yet. And I'm just frustrated because I feel like we were maybe going along that path.
Yes.
And this might provoke a backlash that has the opposite effect of what's been intended here. I don't know. It's very frustrating.
Well, and this is something that you and Sarah talk about a lot, but I just think that the political fallout of this is all going to happen not while Trump is in office.
Of course.
And so I'm so scared that and Democrats are just really bad at naming that narrative. Like, the first people are going to be dying of sepsis because of bad biomedical research hygiene ending when Trump is, well, God willing, no longer in office, if he's not in office for the rest of his life. And it's going to look like a failure on a Democrat's watch. There's it.
Yeah, because Democrats are always in the heart attack.
Yeah. Yes.
I think that's the problem. It's
Yes.
always very, very reactive to the current moment.
Yes.
It's like how everyone keeps talking about Democrats have to go on podcasts now because the 2024 election was the podcast election.
Yes.
And I think, well, that was the last one. That's not what the next one's going to be. We have to be looking ahead. But
Figure out what the next one is, guys.
Let's talk about anti-Semitism, because it is strange to put the orders with this laser-like focus on Jewish students next to all of the orders that tell us any identity-based focus is unlawful and discriminatory. So I'm curious how you have been reading the Trump administration's stance on student protest around the Israel-Gaza war and protecting Jewish students on campuses.
Yeah. So I am Jewish, and we had an election just last night. I am free to represent all Jews on this podcast today. So I've been, and it was it was a unanimous election. So I speak for all Jews.
Jews famously monolithic in their viewpoints.
Monolithic in their viewpoints. I don't even agree with myself by the time I get to the end of a sentence usually. So, yeah, I personally, so I come from a very specific place on this, as every single person in the world does, and as every Jew does. I would like to say I am the grandchild of 4 concentration camp Holocaust survivors, and am the child of immigrants. I'm a first generation American Jew. And just to put all of my cards on the table, I think the Trump administration claiming anti-Semitism is twofold. I think that there are some Jewish billionaires who ha- have certain desires, right? Like as far as Israel, and Trump has strategically aligned himself with a couple of those people who have very specific, just like very specific policy requirements. And Trump is able to sort of sing that tune and get their support without it costing him anything. And then everything else that the Trump administration says about caring about anti-Semitism, I would say is one of the most anti-Semitic things that they could do. They are using Jews as a scapegoat to do what they want politically. And this country has liked arresting dark-skinned people who they think of as potentially Muslim, even if they're not Muslim. I mean, I would say since 2001, but probably since long before that. And so, like, now doing this in the name of anti-Semitism, I feel is so similar to like blood libel stuff, except that Jews aren't the ones um being attacked by the government. We're just being used in order to attack others. Um no, I'm like, you are completely objectifying and like taking advantage of me and my identity in order to do your political will. And this has nothing to do with protecting Jews. This has nothing to do with protecting Jews. And I would argue, as far as the Trump administration, it doesn't even have anything to do with Israel. I think that they are using what is going on in Israel and more importantly, what's going on in Gaza as an excuse to do what they will. And like evangelical Christians do this with Jews sort of professionally, that like we need Jews in Israel in order for the Messiah to rise, right? Like this is just Jews being used for political will. And I please stop doing things in my name. Like, I'm good. I'm fine. I don't need it.
It feels very similar to me to the opportunism that you referenced around the hearings with college presidents.
Yes.
In the wake of these protests. The protests were just such a visual, easy to understand moment
Yep.
for a person who is removed from them.
Yep.
That it created runway. We know that the goal of this administration is to deport as many non-citizens as possible.
Yep.
I mean, that's not a paraphrase. Stephen Miller this week yelled at ICE professionals in the Oval Office about getting those deportation numbers up to 3,000 people a day. It's explicit.
Yeah.
It's explicit that the goal is to deport as many non-citizens as possible. And so I do think that you're right. Revoking these visas was always part of the plan. The campus protests just gave incredible cover for that plan.
Yep. And they get to look, it's not just cover. It gives them a look of heroism, right? It with this narrative of we are protecting Jews. And it's a look of heroics with evangelical Christians of where you're protecting Israel, which like they're not protecting Israel. They're protecting an evangelical Christian idea of what Israel and its borders should be, right? Like it's just narrative. This is not safer for Jews. It is it's not safer for anyone. It is just getting a certain type of deportation number up.
You know, when I did consulting work for businesses, I talked about the drama triangle all the time.
Ooh.
That, drama is spending time and energy on a problem that you can't solve.
Mm-hmm.
And there are 3 roles in the drama triangle,
Mm-hmm.
the perpetrator, the victim, and the hero.
Mm-hmm.
And all 3 of those people are bringing drama to a situation instead of just trying to solve a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking at this administration more and more through that prism these days because the deportation situation has completely lost the plot to me. I understand that we have a challenge at the southern border that we're not managing well and that is not respectful of anyone's dignity, not the people who live in those border communities, not the people crossing into the country, not the people charged with doing law enforcement there.
Yep.
That is a problem that someone needs to solve. But all these efforts just feel like drama around that problem to me.
Yep. And distraction, right?
Yes.
I went down a rabbit hole doing like research on blood libel stories of in the 19th century in Europe, there were a lot of Jews were killed under the false story that there is a Jewish tradition to kill Christians and use their blood for matzah for Passover Seder. And and like not only like tens of thousands of Jews were killed, at night during pogroms in, trumping up these fake things, and then individuals' lives were ruined on individual cases. And then you look at it and it's like the individual cases, like sometimes people were killed, right? And children were kidnapped. And I'm like, no justice was done for those children, right? Like, so it's serving no one, right? Like it's not serving the like victims of the crimes that actually happened either. And so this just seems like a a different version of that where p- you know protesters who I like the most American thing that you can be is an immigrant who protests, right? Like that is I like can't imagine anything more American. And the idea that like people are being arrested in my name, it just really like makes me sick.
I really appreciate you sharing that. I can imagine that's not easy to talk about. And I'm grateful that you're willing to do it. I also would love to pick your brain for a second. Sarah and I have been talking about campus protests since we started making this show.
Yeah.
And I feel like every time we talk about it, there's a moment when we say, ugh, this is just bad that this is on the national news.
Yeah.
Because there are so many dynamics on campus that are that you just can't be aware of sitting on my couch in Kentucky.
Yeah.
I wonder if you have seen anything that you think this is the way you deal with a difficult campus protest. Like here is a healthy, good way to at least process what's happening, if not be in the center of it, trying to help students learn some lessons and resolve some difficult tensions.
Yeah. Oh God. Nothing broad. I've seen I definitely think that is the level at which schools are schools. Like they are operating as schools and students are learning what it is to be political citizens. And I agree with you. I think it is just a shame when they get national coverage. I mean, Harvard students at the end of the day, at least the undergrads, are around 18 years old, right? Like between 18 and 22 years old on average. And I definitely don't want to be publicly, seen for actions that I'm taking locally for anything that I did at that age. Um, this is where like the spaces that I'm in when I am on campus, which again is very infrequent these days. I just think treating them as students is the way to go, right? So like my dear friend Matt Potts is the minister of Memorial Church in the middle of Harvard Yard, and he made sure that like bathrooms were available to the students who were in the encampments. And I'm like, right, because they're students. And so you keep the doors open. And there were other buildings on campus that weren't letting them use bathrooms. And so I'm like, I just think it's really important. They are there in capacities as students. And so treating them as students feels like the most important thing to me. And that means everything is pedagogy. Like everything should be about pedagogy. Like whatever it is on your ID, if your ID says researcher, like I think you should be treated as a researcher. If your ID says therapist, you should be treated as therapist. If your ID says student, I think you should be treated as a student.
I think that's a really useful framework. And a good transition. The last piece of this, we could talk about specific actions that the administration has taken towards universities for 15 episodes.
Yeah.
I want to go very big picture for a second. Are you worried that this will discourage people from going to college, teaching
Yes.
college, like participating in campus life?
Yes. I brought so uh as you know, I love literature and I make
Yes.
meaning of my life through literature. And I just read Demon Copperhead, the Barbara Kingsolver book.
Hmm.
And she has a quote in it about why schools in Virginia are funded the way that they are. She puts this in the mouth of a teacher and then resaid through the narrator, Demon, of nobody needed to get all that educated for being a minor, so they let the schools go to rot, and they made sure no mills or factories got in the door, coal only, right? And that to this day, you have to cross a lot of ground to find other work, that this is by design. And I really do think that this is by design. I think that the Trump administration and the people who are interested in that are trying to keep people out of universities and to I really do think I'm worried I sound like a nutty conspiracy theorist, but I think that they want to keep us stupid and keep us incurious, right? Like if you signs of wisdom and maturity are curiosity and compassion, and at its best, universities are supposed to be places where you reward curiosity and compassion, um, and deep learning. And I think that by making universities the boogeyman, I like you're gonna keep us stupid and incurious. And Um, I don't think that universities are the only place to be curious or learn compassion. I think people are doing that in a million ways every day and in a million different spaces. And I definitely don't want universities to be the only place that we invest in
Right.
to do that work at all, at all, at all. But I do think that there's a reason that they are going after these places, and it's by design. What do you think?
I can't figure out what the big vision is because if I put this alongside the tariffs, alongside this reindustrialization focus, I understand believing that Americans just having this white collar service economy doesn't serve enough people. I think that's undoubtedly true.
Of course.
And I think there is a way to have a lot of lifelong learning and intelligence and wisdom in the trades and
Yes.
in craft and in all kinds of things that people do with their hands and their bodies all day, every day. And I am for efforts to lift up that work and
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 fund that
increase the
work.
opportunities available
Ugh,
to people doing that work. Yes,
yes.
absolutely. So so there's like that piece of it. The administration is also, I don't think it's too strong to say, in bed with the tech giants
Yep.
and envisioning a world where AI is completely unregulated, where cryptocurrency is completely unregulated. And I cannot reconcile that with this vision of reindustrialization that actually helps people. I think what they're setting the stage for, if we actually get to more things being manufactured in the United States, those things will be manufactured by machines, not people.
Yep.
And if the service economy has been wiped out in part by AI, replacing what people used to do, and in the rest by our failure to invest in universities and our cultural dissuasion of people from attending them, I don't know what I just don't know what the vision is. I don't know what we're left with.
I built a small group of billionaire oligarchs.
And everyone else, what? Is their problem to like benevolently dictate? I just don't.
Yeah.
Is that the
Like
vision?
to
I don't
steal our
know.
water. I yeah, I think so. I just like think there's a deep lack of care. I mean, this is where I really do think that becoming a billionaire is like getting an infection, that it starts really corrupting your brain. It's like a brain virus that goes in because you start to believe if you equate more money with better, then you're like, I've done the most better. I've done the best. And therefore, you can't tell me that anything I've ever done is wrong. I won at life. And therefore, there is no feedback that is negative. Like everything I've done, I've turned to gold. And everybody else is wrong. And you have to eventually just start believing in like such a severe kind of individualism. It can't be based on any kind of logic, right? Because it's more money than you can spend in a million lifetimes than your children would be able to spend. Like, and so at this point, I just have to believe that like their brain has a virus that my brain can't. I can't operate within the logic of that.
I think it's a supercharged version of some really good advice I got in law school.
Ooh.
My third year of law school, I had a really good professor.
Mhm.
She was a teacher
Mm-hmm.
In every way. And it was obvious probably to anyone who knew me that I was not going to be happy or successful in big law.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of who I am and how I operate and what I find meaningful. And I really did not enjoy my summer experience in big law.
Mm-hmm.
But I got the offer letter,
Mm-hmm.
and it was more money than I ever imagined I could make, and
Mm-hmm.
a 401k and health insurance and a whole bunch of things I hadn't really thought about before, but that
Mhm.
suddenly seemed extremely important. And I thought about all that my parents sacrificed to get me through school. And so I was thinking about taking the job, and I was talking to her about it. And she said, do not take this job. Do not take this job. Because what will happen is you'll get in, and what you have, you'll want to keep. Once you start making this salary, you will not know how to live a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And you will be told if you leave, it's because you couldn't cut it, not because you wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Because these institutions, and they're not full of bad people. I still
No.
have many friends and love the folks I worked with
Yeah.
because I did take the job.
Mm-hmm.
These institutions depend on you believing that you did something great to belong there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you leave, it must be because you weren't great enough.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that turned out to be exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
Like she was just exactly right. I probably should not have taken the job. It was very difficult to figure out how to live differently once I made that amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
So many things.
Yep.
She was just exactly right about. And I can imagine if that was true in my little life,
right,
on that tiny scale, what does that mean when it's just exponential in every way? Every bit of it has just blown to the top. So I think you're right that we do have this relatively small group of people who cannot fathom that there's a different way to live than the way that they're living if you are a smart person who cares about the world.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry for that amount of pressure. Like every time I read about Elon Musk, I think, I'm really sorry for all the things that you're going through. You seem to be going through things constantly on the biggest stage of the world. And I can still tap some empathy, even though he is one of the wealthiest people on earth.
Yeah.
The inconsistency across the administration that influence has wrought, I think is going to become an enormous political liability. At least I hope it will.
I hope so.
But I'm even more concerned that substantively we're going to start to see everything become more impoverished.
Yeah.
Because there isn't a worldview driving at something real.
Yeah. I think that you start to see the world as assets, right? And people just as ways of getting you the money and of data points. And no, I think it's terrifying. I am a hopeful person. But billionaires scare me.
Yeah, the path that we're on right now, I think ultimately cannot be sustained. I remain hopeful because I think it is becoming increasingly obvious that none of this is for anyone.
Right.
Except that tiny, tiny echelon at the top. And even that group can't totally agree on where
Yeah.
we should be going.
Yeah, thank God for that. Thank God
Yeah.
for the fact that they all became billionaires in slightly different ways, and they all think that the way that they became the billionaire was the right way to become the billionaire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we have lots of examples in history that show us that doesn't sustain, that the people eventually say, no, this has to be for more people than this tiny, tiny group.
Totally. And this is a conversation, coming from a space where I talk about religion a lot. That absolutely. And there have been a million apocalypses, and there are apocalypses all the time, right? A cancer diagnosis in your family is an apocalypse.
Yes.
A storm coming through your community and destroying your home is an apocalypse. And people pass away, and we persevere, and we grieve, and we are changed, but we survive. And the AI of it all and the tech of it all, and like none of it is new, and I am scared that some of this is new in new ways.
Yeah.
But people thought that about the printing press. People
Right.
thought that, right? Like, I don't want to be the one, calling end of the world. People have thought so many things were the end of the world. And you go back, I mean, people were outraged at the foundation of the novel that this was just going to ruin the world. Women were going to be getting ideas and, what was going to happen. And Beth, I'm here to tell you, maybe that is where everything went wrong. Maybe it was the 19th
The women
century
getting
novel. Yes, it gave women ideas. And that's why we are where we are. So no, I think new technology always has scared people and has always made people worry about the end of the world. So whenever I am worried that these new technologies are going to be at the end of the world, I like to remind myself that I'm part of an ancient tradition of being afraid of that.
Yes. And that I am lucky to live in a country where we can quickly change course if we don't like it.
Yes.
Look how quickly we changed to this course.
Yes.
And we can do it again and again. And every day, I can't even keep up with the judiciary restraining this administration, stepping up and saying, no, this is not how we live here. This is not what we do. So I really am long-term optimistic.
Yeah.
I really, really am. I think that we are having a lot of questions put to us pretty sharply, and specifically in the context of higher ed. And I'm so glad that you were here to talk about it. Let's get back to those problematic novels, though,
yes,
and literature and making meaning of life in our Outside of Politics segment. Vanessa, Sarah and I always like to end with just like an exhale because it does get a little intense.
Yes.
Here.
Yes.
I mentioned at the top that you do many things. I honestly think I'm a very hardworking person, but I don't know that I hold a candle to you. And
I'm not that hardworking
of all the things you do
person.
and think about. Okay, well, let's talk about that first. Tell me about that, because it seems from where I sit like you make and do and think about a huge number of things every week.
I don't do anything alone. Like, there's not a single project that I do alone. And so I think, and I truly think this with my whole body, and I think that yours and my friendship is proof of this. I think I have exceptional taste in people. And that I'm great at roping people in to being my friend and working with them. And so there's like literally not a single project that I've ever done that I've done alone. Like certainly nothing worthwhile. So I just am along for the ride. But yes, one of the things that I am working on, which you very generously are letting me talk about, is this program that I run called What Matters as part of my company. And the reason that I think your audience would be interested in it, and so the point of the class, it's a school year-long class. And the idea is that you have a year to discern what matters to you and learn how to live up to those values, make some commitments on how to live up to those values. But we do it with novels and like with storytelling and chaplaincy and some things. And so I really just want to talk. I'm curious what book you have used in your life that you are like, or not just because me, I also use like Gilmore Girls, but like what piece of art has helped you realize what what matters to you, like what value you hold dear.
The first thing that comes to mind for me is Moana.
Uh-huh. One of my favorites.
I love Moana so much.
Me
And
too.
when I did some work with a parenting coach a couple of years ago, I worked with Mary Van Geffen. She asked me to think of an avatar in literature, film, or television that embodied how I want to feel as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
And Moana's grandmother
Grandmother.
was it for me.
Yeah.
And it has changed my life, not to be hyperbolic about
No.
it, because I yap for a living.
Yeah.
And so I love words, and I tend to think I can talk my way through every problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized when Moana's grandmother came up for me how little she speaks in that movie,
Mm-hmm.
but how big her presence is,
Mm-hmm.
and how her presence for Moana is not just comfort, but it is that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just challenge, but it is that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just I've been here before, I've seen some things, you can learn from me, but it is that too. And that's what I want to be.
It's also
for
joy.
my daughters. Joy and fun and lightness
Yeah.
and creativity and playfulness.
Yeah.
She just embodies how I would love to feel to my kids. Now, I still talk too much with them, I know, but I really have learned a lot by thinking about that example. And a character is such a beautiful guidepost
Yeah.
because it is somehow easy to extend what we know about her from one short film into almost any situation that we're in.
Yeah. One of a woman who worked with us for several years, she's now a chaplain intern at Johns Hopkins. Her name is Natalie Folkert. She taught a class for us called I think it was called Discerning Your Own Patron Saints, where she had people pick a character from literature, film, TV, and design a patron saint story for them. Like
I
what
love that.
I know. I didn't take it, but I think it's our most highly reviewed class that we ever offered. And yeah, we're reading Women Talking in What Matters this year, which is one of my all-time favorite books. And there's a character in that named Salome. And she is the angriest woman. She is just so angry, except at her children. She's angry at the world for her children. And she, at one point in the novel, carries her daughter on her back for 3 days to get her medication. And she will pre-chew pills for her daughter, just like the intimacy of her. And I think about Salome as, all the time when it comes, am I willing to embarrass myself for my kids? Am I willing, right? Like, what am I willing to do for my kids? And it's just like, well, anything. I will literally carry them on my back for 3 days, and I will chew things and spit them out. And then I don't care what the rest of the world thinks of me when it comes to the fierceness of my kids. One of my best friends, Julia, who also loves Salome, wanted to name her daughter Salome after Salome and Women Talking, and her husband was like, can we not name our daughter after someone who wants to murder every man she sees? And she was like, fine.
I mean, it's a reasonable ask.
It is a really reasonable ask. But these characters, and I think because we owe them less because they are fictional, right? We don't have to hold them in all of their complications. We just get to, make them our patron saints. I did not know that about you and Moana's grandmother.
Oh, she's very important in my life.
I love that.
Another literary reference that I think about all the time, it's amazing how sticky these things are.
Yes.
I wish that some of my religious texts stuck with me the way some of this does. But in high school, my English teacher had us read a Faulkner short story. I can't even remember what the short story was or what it was about.
Yeah.
But it contained the sentence, Calpurnia endures, about one of the characters.
Yeah.
And I think about Calpurnia enduring at least once a week.
Yeah.
When things seem really hard, it just comes to me Calpurnia endures.
Yeah.
And I try to think, me too. Just like you, I'm here enduring as well. And I feel bad that I can't even call up what all is behind that reference anymore.
Doesn't matter.
The sentence has really stuck with me.
Yeah. I think about, my favorite novel is Jane Eyre. And the first line of the second chapter is I resisted all the way. And she is being dragged and locked into a room, and she doesn't get anything out of resisting all the way. She's being dragged kicking and screaming, and then she gets ignored. Um, but I'm just like, that's going to be me. I'm going to resist all the way. Like, pull me by my hair and I will go kicking and screaming.
I love that.
Anyway, I really love thinking about this, and I love bringing intention to it. I love this coach being like, who is the character? Because I think that you can make your whole life more meaningful. I really do.
Well, I agree with you. It's different to have a character than to have 5 steps,
Yes.
or these specific words that we say when our kids do X, Y, or Z. I think a lot of advice in life, whether it comes from a religious perspective or an expert perspective or a coach, whatever, a lot of advice in life just feels confining, and it feels like you're trying to exercise control over situations that you don't have a lot of control over.
Yep.
And so the genius of what is your story?
Yeah.
Like, what is your character? What is your posture? No matter what else is going on around you has been really powerful for me.
Yeah. And the thing about like picking these characters and stories that speak to us, it's saying follow whatever it is that you already love and love it with purpose, right? Like, you already love Moana. I'm not trying to sell you on Moana.
Right.
You already love Moana. How do you love it all the time and live up to it? I think that's often we talk about things that we love as guilty pleasures. And I'm like, no. How do you just love it better? Right? Like,
Yes.
you shouldn't feel guilty about it. Just carry it with you all the time.
So tell me about, if I sign up for What Matters, what's my expectation? What's happening for me?
You're so sweet. So it is a 9-month program. Where it's a small cohort where we spend a lot of time in small groups, really getting to know each other. And there are sort of 3 tracks. One is sacred reading, where we close read books in order to have a shared vocabulary for meaning making. This year we're doing Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler, Women Talking by Miriam Taves, and Station 11 by Emily St. Mandel. And then we have a whole class called meaning making, where you are thinking about how to make meaning in your own life. And then we have a whole class called storytelling, where you learn how to tell a story about who you want to be and how you want to live into your values. And we have one-on-one chaplaincy sessions. And so it's really supposed to be a year of like looking closely at your life in conversation with story. So hopefully you can tell yourself exactly the kind of story that you're telling about the kind of mom you want to be, of like, at the end of the day, I want to be, I want us all to have these like grounded islands that we can stand on, of like, this is bottom line who I am. And I think that we grow and change, and so the narratives we were raised with as kids don't work for us anymore, and then we have to go find new ones, and so we're trying to create a space for people to find new ones. And we have scholarships available if you want to take this class, but also you can do this at home on your own. You can just start thinking closely about your favorite books or TV shows or movies and living in conversation with them. Try this at home, Beth. No one gets hurt.
I love it. I also think it's just a hugely political thing to sink deeper and deeper into your sense of what's important and who you want to be. Because I just did this thing for Memorial Day for our premium listeners, where I went back through every Memorial Day since 1971, when Congress made it a holiday, and found like one historic event that happened on that day.
Whoa.
And it was so interesting because, we say all the time, like, oh, I'm ready for some precedented times.
Yeah.
And what you realize the more you look at history is that these times are precedented. Like, we have been here before. Every year has felt chaotic in its way.
Yeah.
I think all the time about the Washington Post piece that said when people say the good old days, they mean when they were 8.
Yes.
Like, that's everybody has a good old days, and it's when they were 8 because they didn't realize what was happening around them. And so exercises like this, where you're able to just be like, whatever else happens, here's who I am and what I'm about and what I'm aspiring to and what support I need, so that we can just keep on keeping on. I think that's hugely political and valuable.
Yeah, it happened for me. Someone, a friend of mine in school was like, I just want to make sure that we're all ready to share water when water resources run low. And I was like, that's me. That's what I want to spend every conversation of mine. I want it to be about us loving each other more so that we're ready to share water. And whenever I sort of get confused as to what my work is, I'm like, is this going to get us better at sharing water? Like, right? Like, and just having that, and sometimes sometimes the answer is no, and I have to do it anyway. And sometimes the answer is no, and it helps me get back on path, but it's so nice to have this grounding principle of like, that is what I care about. I care about us turning to our neighbor and saying, I have enough water. Do you need some? And yeah, I just think everyone needs their answer.
I think maybe Jewel gave me my answer to that question. Do you remember her song Hands that started, if I could tell the world just one thing, it would be we're all okay? That's my answer.
Yeah.
That's what I try to find as like my guiding light for work.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. So
well,
I want to know everybody's now.
Yes. What are your things? We'll put all the information for What Matters in our show notes.
That's very
And
generous.
I hope that people will take advantage of the opportunity to work with you. I have not done this program, but I have done other things that you create. And I can attest to the excellence of the people that you surround yourself with. And
evidence you.
And the care that you pour into these programs for the people who participate in them. So, highly endorse anything that Vanessa Zoltan is part of.
I gotta say, Beth, I don't get nervous for a lot of things, but you and Sarah have such a high standard for the brilliant podcast that you put out. I was so nervous being here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for doing this with me. I had no doubt that it would be fantastic. And I think it has been, just to toot our own horns as we head out here.
I adore you. Thank you for making this podcast.
Thank you for making it with me and for being my friend. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back with you again next week. Everybody have the best weekend available to you.
Pantsuit Politics is produced by Studio D Podcast Production.
Elise Knapp is our managing director. Maggie Pinton is our director of community engagement.
Xander Singh is the composer of our theme music with inspiration from original work by Dante Lima.
Our show is listener supported. Special thanks to our executive producers:
Stephanie Elms,
Sasha Egolf,
the Villanueva family,
the Bookshelf on Church in Kilmarnock, Virginia,
Lindsay Sauer,
Laura Martin,
Kristen Wendell,
Christina Werner,
Kristen Heidinger,
Kimberly Ludwig,
Julie Huff,
Jill Biziano,
Jessica Borrow,
Jan Feltz,
Jackie Franklin Earp,
Heather Ericacy,
the Charney family,
Gabrielle McDonald and Wren,
Ellen Burns,
Connie Perchetti,
Christian Campbell,
Beth Loy,
Ashley Terry,
Anya Bensaka,
Amy and Derek Starr Redwine,
Carla Hagemeister,
Emily Ho,
Emily Grover Kopek,
Christy Johnson,
Sharice Winter,
Ashley Kennedy,
Mark and Rachel Redman.
The Dixon family,
Chelsea Garter, Christy Matthews, Ellen Scott and Karen Shoebottom, Jeff Davis, Kathleen Gallant, Michelle Wood, Nicole Berkless, Norma Starry, Paula Brimmer, Sarah Little, Vicki Jackman, Will and Jess Conway.